I'm having this like seriously amazing drink from Trader Joe's, and it's carbonated water, apple cider vinegar, strawberry and organic flavors, basil flavors, and honey, and it's organic. I should not open the wrapper with my teeth, but I do it anyway. I could feel my grandma like yelling at me. Okay, here are the things that I, as an individual, mind you, this isn't like the base level advice, this is just me as an individual, the things I consider when a dancer says, I want to go on point. Make sure you grab a pen and paper and you're taking notes, because there's a lot of factors that I personally take into consideration when a dancer says, hey, I want to go on point, I have a desire to go on point, I'm ready, let's do it. Okay, so here's the first one. My first one is that you are at least 12 years old. And how did I get to this number? Well, I did some research, which, by the way, disclaimer, please do your own research. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Don't just take what I'm saying for face value and not investigate and do your own work. Please do your own work. Please do your own background and research. This is just one person's perspective and someone that's been in the ballet world for 12 years and was on point for 10 plus years. This is just my opinion, my perspective. So please do your own background and your own research. So how did I come to that age? I did some research and found that actually your feet do not stop developing until age 20 to 21. That's when they stop like growing completely. But the bones start to harden and the bones are like mature at age 11 to 14. There's no like set age because it's different for everyone. And so what most companies say is, hey, we're not even going to consider a dancer till age 12. So yeah, I would say the first thing is I'm not even going to consider it until age 12. That doesn't mean you can't do pre-point. That doesn't mean you can't do exercises leading up to this beforehand, but to go on to point, I'm not even going to consider it until age 12. The second factor I would consider is the number of years you've been in ballet training. So for me, I'm gonna say at least 2 to 3 years that you've been in ballet classes, at least 2 hours a week, preferably more than that, but at least 2 hours a week. You understand the basic movements, the basic positions, things like that, just things that you're gonna need going into point, because point is more advanced than, flat, of course. So yeah, at least 2 to 3 years of ballet training to be considered for a point. Consideration that I take into account when a dancer says I'm ready to go on point is, how long have you been in pre-point? First of all, does your studio even offer pre-point? Because if it doesn't, then I'm willing to give you guys exercises. If that's the case and they don't offer pre-point, so please comment below if your studio does not offer a pre-point class or your teachers don't have pre-point exercises for you. I would be willing to make a video on this. But from what I've seen, the dance studios that do offer point typically tend to have pre-point classes. So I'd say try to be in pre-point for at least 6 months to a year. Again, it varies to each dancer. This is not set in stone guidelines. It's so case by case, and I can't emphasize that enough. Maybe I would put a dancer on at 12 years old, but maybe an older dancer who's only been doing ballet for the past year and is 16 years old isn't ready to go on point. And that's happened to me before. So this isn't the end all be all. This is just considerations that I take. So yeah, have you been in pre-point classes? How long have you been in the pre-point classes? If your studio doesn't offer a pre-point class, how long have you been doing exercises that are going to strengthen you for a point? How often do you do those exercises? These are things that I consider. So that's the third thing, is pre-point experience, basically. The fourth thing that I consider, and this is something that's a little bit out of my scope, a little bit out of my experience and my practice and what I've seen, is do you have the anatomy for it? Because I've personally experienced dancers that were not anatomically made to be on point, go on point. And I say this is outside of my practice because I'm not a PT, I'm not certified in looking at the anatomy of the foot. I can just tell you from a very, very surface level, you know, like, hey, I think, you know, you can do this and you can get over your box, or you can't, this isn't going to be safe. The makeup of your ankle and of your foot structure isn't enough. As is, it's ridiculous that we're even like dancing, putting our foot in a box. We're putting all our weight on the box of our, you know, foot. Like, that's crazy. But on top of that, you know, to have the anatomy for it, that is something I consider too. So I usually say, hey, do you have a PT that was perhaps a dancer, understands the dance world, or what goes into what makes a pointe class, you know, and what they're gonna have to consider, the fact that you're balancing on one foot, the fact that all your weight is on a box, like a tiny box, a tiny platform. And again, that's outside of my scope and that's outside of my experience. So I've already had people ask me like, hey, can you go into detail on the anatomy? All I'm gonna say is I know people that aren't anatomically made to do it, and they either end up hurting themselves, or they'll do a year and then they're like, you know what, I can't do this. I can't get over my box. And it has nothing to do with the shoe. It has everything to do with just the structure of their foot. So I'm gonna say, go to a physician, go ask them, like, this is just a consideration I make, and one more step my dancers have to take to go on pointe. The fifth thing that I really consider, and I think to me, this is the most crucial, this is the most important point that I make with my dancers in discussing going on pointe and making that next step, because it's so serious, is how serious are you about ballet? How much do you love ballet? And I know that your knee-jerk reaction is gonna be, I love ballet and I wanna, you know, do this full time, but I really advise you to ask yourself, like, do you wanna go all the way with this? And I'm not saying, do you wanna be a professional dancer? Although that would be like, in my opinion, immediately I would say, yes, please consider yourself, you know, for pointe, and consider all these other things. But yes, you should go on pointe if you wanna be a professional ballerina. But if you want to do it recreationally, or you find more of your passions are in jazz, hip hop, competition, I mean, the dance world is so extensive and it has so many avenues. It's not just about ballet, you know, and you don't have to go on pointe to be a good dancer, to be a well-rounded dancer. I think that's a major misconception in the dance world right now is, oh, I have to go on pointe to be the best rounded dancer I could possibly be. And it's like, no, I argue that there's no need to put yourself through all these pains and difficulties and expenses that the pointe world brings inevitably just by being on pointe if you don't even have a passion for ballet, or you don't want to make it your full-time career, and it's not even something that interests you. It's just something you do because your studio says, hey, if you're going to be a competition dancer, you need to do ballet. So I would ask you to really stop and consider, how much do you really love ballet? If you really love it that much and you're that serious about it, are you serious enough to take on all the injuries and all the disadvantages that come from being on pointe that we like to push under the rug, like getting bunions and like getting Morton's neuroma, which is what I have, which is basically a pinched bundle of nerves, and let me tell you, it hurts. It feels like I'm walking on rocks, like missing toenails, like bleeding, like crying, like, you know, everything else, all the difficulties that come with pointe. Like, is it really worth it unless you truly love ballet and you truly want to go all the way with this? Like I said, as is, it's crazy that we put all our weight and all of who we are as a person on a tiny little platform. Like, it's already kind of, it's already not natural. So, like, why push yourself if you aren't truly in love with ballet? So that's like the biggest concern of mine, is like, what do you really want to do with your ballet career? Not just because it looks cool, or it's, oh yeah, well, I've gotten the badge of pointe, or, you know, I can dance around at home in my pointe shoes and tell all my friends, like, I'm better than you because I'm on pointe. Like, that's not what this is about. It's very serious, and it's something you take very seriously. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest factor for me. Okay, here's some other factors. I said 5 to 7 in the beginning because these are some other factors I always like to talk with the dancers and their families, or whoever it is that's funding them or supporting them throughout their journey, whether that be, you know, an older sibling or a biological parent, sometimes a grandparent, like, you never know. So I like to sit down with them and their families, or whoever it is that's supporting them, maybe it's their guardian, and say, look, you need to understand that Pointe is extremely expensive. It's not just you buy one pair of Pointe shoes a year and you're good to go. Maybe some people it is and they don't break their Pointe shoes, but I can just give you my background and my experience. My parents had to pay for Pointe shoes every 1 to 2 weeks. If it was nutcracker season and I was on my Pointe shoes every single day, rehearsing and just running through them, it was like anywhere from 1 to 2 times a week. And that was like me rotating through pairs too. So like really trying to elongate, really trying to extend the life of these shoes. That was me jet gluing. That was like going through everything I could to really extend the life of the shoe and be considerate of my parents' finances. So I always say, look, it's really expensive. You got to consider the toe pads, which are usually on average $20. You got to consider the shoe itself, which is usually, I think the cheapest is like, what, 60? I'm going to say like $60 to $70. The most expensive, Gainer Mindens, which are about like $120. And that's not even saying like, that's just base level. That's not even a custom shoe. Like you get into custom shoes and it gets really expensive. So I would say it's something to consider, and the ribbons and the elastics. So yeah, and you're running through these things, like for me, it was monthly. So no, it's not a cheap endeavor. And if you're already struggling to meet the cost of ballet, I'm just saying it's something to consider before you jump into this pool and you've considered everything else already. So I always like to talk about the finances and really ground, the family or the guardian in the truth of the matter and what my family experienced, because it could potentially be thousands and thousands of dollars. The other factor that I personally took into consideration, and it's not really a factor that's directly related to the dancer, it's more me as a teacher, how I check myself, is I always like to get a second opinion. So specifically at this last studio that I was teaching at, there was a lot of young girls that wanted to go on Pointe and they met all the other qualifications. I wanted to check myself. So what I did was I went to my friend who has as much experience as me, as much background, gets the ballet world, has been on Pointe for over a decade, and she could just fact check me and be like, yeah, I think you should consider them. Maybe no, it's too early. And so I really used her as a resource, like, hey, I'm considering for so-and-so waiting another year. And she'd be like, yeah, that's probably what I would do too. Or she would say, no, I don't think you should hold them back any longer. I think it's time. So I always got a second opinion as a teacher, and just made sure that I was getting checked by someone else too and not being biased, I guess. So yeah, I try to make it as unbiased as possible. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications on when I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching if you've gotten this far. Please comment if you found this helpful. Comment if you have any questions. I would love to do a pre-Pointe exercises type video for you guys. If your studio doesn't offer pre-Pointe. And as always, have a great day and thank you so much for watching.